Hello and welcome to the Good Leader podcast. I'm Will Van Hart, and today it's my privilege and delight to welcome my really good friend, Will James, onto the podcast. Will, welcome to you.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Will, you are a coach and we connected over coaching. Before that, you were in education and you've got a great coaching story that's really inspired me, and you've been super helpful to me, even giving me a pack of playing cards that I still use, which have fantastic questions on them. So, a little, obviously this is slightly unnatural in the sense that you're going to be helping me host this podcast. So we're going to talk a bit more about that later on, but I thought it would be great to share, I guess, a bit about you with the audience. You tell me a bit about your story. And I'd love to start off with, how did you end up in coaching?
Well, so I guess as with most of us, it's a sort of a winding story. But in a sense, now I look back, I kind of think maybe I was always going to end up here.
Okay.
Because even as a child, I kind of was excited about trying to support people, help people flourish. And I made a mess of it often. And I also got quite kind of burned out myself often. And I think gradually as I've kind of grown up, I've just experimented with lots of different iterations of how do you partner people to sort of see exciting things happen, to see them kind of realize their dreams, become more of who they are. How do you do that? So I left university and worked a bit in charity and church, and there were loads of things I loved about it, but I just felt that I don't think this is the right fit for me. And so then I actually got married, and then my wife and I we decided to spend a year going around the world, spending some time with projects, working with people who kind of needed support and needed to kind of flourish and thrive. And one of the things we really found around that trip was that a lot of the people who had entered into it with lots of purpose and lots of heart were basically really burned out personally. We were like, oh, that so much of what they're doing looks so great, and yet that doesn't look very attractive. We came back to the UK, and I really didn't know which way to move forward. But I thought, I know that I'm quite people oriented. I know that I am good at sort of helping people learn and grow. Not quite sure what it is, but it'd be good to kind of not bury my talents, but to try and develop them. And so I thought I'd train as a teacher, because I thought that will be continuing to build my strengths and my kind of capabilities, even though I don't think probably teaching will be my forever kind of career. And I did that for 6 years, and I've got to say I absolutely loved it. Like, I loved engaging with young people, loved getting to explore ideas. I loved getting to see them be excited about the world and learn about the world. But I found myself, I just got so exhausted. I used to think I used to kind of run this kind of adrenaline roller coaster where I'd get up really early and I'd start my day, but then I'd be on this adrenaline until 3 o'clock, and then I'd just feel exhausted. Too much extrovert time, too much kind of feeding out into people. And so I kind of knew that wasn't going to last forever. But I got more and more involved in kind of people development, helping teachers grow and learn. And then the school actually sent me on a coaching course. And I went on this coaching course and I thought, I think I found a good fit. It not only does it give me some mastery and expertise around helping people grow, but it also gives me some kind of boundaries and structure and principles and sort of self-development that helps me stay in that kind of positive energy.
Amazing. I mean, I always think the best things we do are things that are natural to us. Almost, you're describing that almost that idea of sort of finding what you already know and giving it some shape. You referenced there quite a few times, people being burnt out, people being over-asked of, people having kind of poor boundaries, people being heavily adrenalized and washed out. A lot of leaders who are listening to our podcast would sort of say, isn't that kind of inevitable in leadership? Is it inevitable that we end up burning out in leadership? And to a degree, as coaches, many of our clients might say, well, it's all right for you. You can manage your own schedule. You've got kind of, you're a master of your own destiny. I have to work under a boss who's making significant demands to me, or under a headmaster who's making significant demands, whatever the context happens to be. What do you think? Is it inevitable in today's world that we'll burn out? And if it's not, what do we do to put the brakes on?
Um, well, that's kind of two different strands open up for me with that question. One is that I really like that kind of metaphor of thinking about how, how snakes, as they grow, they shed their skins. And often they like have to actually push through sort of rocks because they've grown so long in one skin, and then they need to shed it so that they can continue their evolution. I like thinking of that as a metaphor for kind of life and personal evolution, that we continuously are evolving and changing and learning about ourselves. So there's an extent to which, burnout or trials and tribulations, challenge, pressure, some of that can be instructive and kind of just be telling us like we're hitting a bit of a ceiling, like it's time to evolve and grow.
Okay.
So I think there's, to some degree, that will always happen for people. But I think there's another side of that answer that is that we can often stay within quite uncreative conditions for far too long.
Okay.
And that we can tend to have patterns that are part of the problem and beliefs that are part of the problem, like can't ask for help, or like it's my duty to stay in the situation, or like can't push back, or can't set boundaries, or need to always say yes, or need to be the answer, or need to be the hero, or need to inhabit some kinds of kind of suboptimal beliefs about ourselves. And I think one of the privileges in the work that we get to do is that we often get to sit with people in a room or on Zoom and make space where they come to see those kind of false narratives or those false stories, those false ideas for what they really are. And we get to see them let go of some of those things, or even just make some space to challenge some of those ideas and the freedom and the growth and the life that can come in as a result.
That's really, really helpful as a way of looking about it. I mean, one of the things I notice as a coach is that many of my clients begin by describing the circumstances, that the circumstances dictate their burnout. And some of my clients have obviously extremely adverse circumstances, as yours will no doubt too. But recognizing actually it's a kind of journey of the heart to accept that our circumstances aren't the only part of the equation. And I think I'd love you to speak into this, but particularly there can be some anger and resentment towards you as a coach when you point out that yes, your circumstances are maybe unhelpful or maybe they're over demanding, but actually you have some agency in your own journey. And I think your own journey there just depicts that well. You kind of, if you like, you've shed your skin in teaching to iterate a new season of growth in coaching. There might be transitions like that our clients might want to make, but a lot of it comes from also recognizing in the context that we're in, there are things we can do
Absolutely.
to grow and overcome the parameters of burnout.
Yeah, in AA they say, don't they, that wherever I go, there I am. And it's like that idea that we always have a part to play in the context that we find ourselves in. And sometimes that's a really difficult message to accept because we're not there yet. We don't want to have to take responsibility. But we know, so many of us know, that it's only on the other side of taking responsibility that we really can create change and that we can actually move forward. So, and I think that's this amazing dance that we get to do, right, in the sort of work that we do, where you're in this dance with people that you're waiting for enough trust in the relationship that they can actually be open to sometimes some of those insights. Like, people can't hear something until they're ready to hear it often. And how do we create a relationship with people where they can become open to hearing some external perspective or some new ideas, some fresh air, some fresh water into their kind of thinking? And people are suddenly, I love it sometimes when people say, well, when you think about it, it sort of seems really obvious, doesn't it? But if we stay on our own in our challenges and in our opportunities, so often we miss the obvious.
say a little bit about false beliefs? Because I mean, you're really perceptive as a coach, and you're helping people come to those moments of revelation. Like you say, when they come to a point when they go, "Oh, that's kind of really obvious, but I hadn't seen it before." False beliefs are really common. Maybe the belief that I have to work in a particular way, that's the way our organization works, therefore I'm kind of on an inevitable track towards burnout. But false beliefs are really challenging because effectively, by definition, we believe them, and they might be faulty, they might be misleading, but ultimately we think, oh,
Mm.
this is what I have to do. How do we begin to engage with like false beliefs? And maybe if people are listening who haven't got a coach, what could they do to begin to bring awareness to the things that they believe about their workplace?
Um, it makes me think about getting married. You know, like, isn't it fascinating that until people get married, they tend to think that their kind of family way of doing things in lots of unconscious ways is just the only way that it can be done. You know, that's the way you load a dishwasher, or that's how much you ought to spend time with your in-laws, or this is how you ought to raise your children. And they're just unconscious. They're just unconscious beliefs of that's just what one does, or that's the way. And I think when you get married, certainly I found this, but I think everybody I know has found this, that you suddenly are involving other people, it or somebody else, in decisions, and actually they're sticking around long enough for you to kind of have to peel off some of the layers of the onion and challenge some of the idea of like that's not the only way, it's a way.
Yeah.
And then what's the way that we want to choose to move forward? And I think friends, partners, you know, multiple people can fulfill some of that function of sort of bringing light into our thinking as we explore things together. And and often we use the phrase around limiting beliefs. What are the beliefs that limit our growth? Certainly, if I hear "have to" or "should" as phrases, it kind of alerts me to something. But also a lot of it is intuitive. It's like, if I'm spending time with somebody and something just doesn't feel good or feel right, I try and sort of honor that data that's coming through, that I'm feeling some disquiet or some discomfort about things. Sometimes I won't even really know what it is. And sometimes it's not for me to work out what it is, but it might push me to want to just play back a phrase or a metaphor or an idea to try and invite somebody else to think about it a bit more. Um, and I think it's you know, I can find it challenging to ask for help,
Yeah.
which is an irony on the other side of what I do. And I've now tried to spend a career trying to work out how to offer people the help that they need to thrive. I know I can find that a challenge. Um, I guess I think that resistance or defensiveness around inviting alternative perspectives, inviting challenge, inviting help, and inviting being able to sit curious in the stuff of our life is, I find it such a life-giving way of being.
Yeah.
And I mean, I went away with some good old friends of mine for a weekend, and it's lovely because, you know, there's years and years of trust there, and we told stories, and we just sort of shared aspects of life and invited curiosity and alternative perspectives. I think for long-term resilience, we have to find people in our lives who we can do that with.
That's really helpful. I was just laughing to myself about the marriage metaphor because, you know, like me and my wife had so many rows about, you know, what we believe is the right way because of what we believed before we were married. We were married for over 20 years. Fortunately, we don't have that many areas now which we haven't addressed. But when things come up where we haven't had those conversations around, well, what do you think about this, or what do you believe about this, and we make assumptions around what we believe, that's where there is that kind of clash. And there's quite a lot of pride in that. I mean, I certainly see that in myself. I'd be like, well, obviously that's the right way of loading the dishwasher, you know, because that's the way it goes, you know, that's the way it works. And I've seen it work. And I was thinking about that the challenge those beliefs that limit us, as you describe them, it can take a lot of humility to change course, even away from catastrophic outcome. It can take a lot of humility to go, actually, there must be another way of doing this in this environment, which is better for me. If we've been doing something the same way over and over again and it's sort of working, even if we can see trouble on the horizon, we can be like, well, I'm going to keep sailing or driving in this direction.
Yeah.
And it takes a significant amount of humility to be willing, I guess, to see that our beliefs are limiting or that there might be alternatives.
One of the things I love about the word humility is that, like human, it comes from the word for humus, which is like a Latin word for soil, I think. And so when we're being humble, it's about kind of remembering that we're from the soil. And I think a brilliant shift that many people are doing is stopping to see themselves so much as an independent individual and starting to see themselves more as an interconnected entity that exists within a wider ecosystem. And if we can do that, so for me, I think part of humility is about recognizing that I'm not entirely independent. I don't live in a vacuum, but that I'm interconnected into a wider ecosystem of family, of origins, of community, of society, of other cultural forces. So even in thinking about that marriage analogy, the beliefs that I hold about marital roles or parenting or all about so many things, they're not all self-generated. They've been influenced by culture and by society. And how can we, I think a helpful way of thinking is thinking, well, actually, how can the whole ecosystem thrive? What's needed in the whole wider ecosystem? And how do I need to evolve to have a more positive impact within that wider ecosystem? So it's both things that need to change. I need to be open to change and what changes are needed in the wider ecosystem. And in some ways that can depersonalize things as well. It's not my fault and it's not my problem, but it's what's necessary for kind of more health in the whole system.
And do you want to say a little bit about some of the people who you find most insightful, who've issued change or who've brought revelation in a sense to you over the years? Is there anyone, what is it specifically about them that you found that you've received that challenge from well?
Are you happy to narrow the question a little bit?
Yeah, I'm just wondering about the sort of person that you've allowed in to bring you maybe challenge or open your vision to your thinking. Because, a lot of people would, particularly when I was an Anglican priest full time, a lot of people would come along and tell me what was wrong with me. I wasn't always very willing to receive feedback about what was wrong. And I think there's a need, isn't there, for a certain level of trust, but also a certain level of insight for you to welcome someone into your world to bring that kind of disarming challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I think that as people mature and they become more at peace with their own limits and foibles, and in a sense recognize, that we're all the same, that we're going to have different areas of challenge, but we've all got areas of challenge. So we're going to have different areas in when we kind of rub people up the wrong way, or the ways that we can be difficult. There's a pack of cards I've got that says, in what ways might you be a difficult person to work with?
That's the cards
there are ways that we can all be a difficult person to work with. I think when I'm with people who have got that sort of humility of recognizing these, let's think a bit about your problems, not because you're worse than me, or let's think a bit about this thing that I think you might be benefit from considering, from that very kind of non-judgmental, but a non-judgmentalism that's informed by sort of humility and self-awareness. I find that really useful. And I find that in that environment, I can actually, instead of being defensive, which I can be on a bad day, I can actually laugh at my own ridiculousness.
Yeah, I love that. I totally resonate with that. I think that's around the sort of the safety of the people, to you, the psychological safety that they provide creates the context from which you can really explore yourself.
Yeah.
I definitely recognize that sort of what I call weaponized feedback versus benevolent feedback. I think for many people in leadership, they receive weaponized feedback, which is a kind of coded criticism housed as feedback, because that's so different as an experience to like the kind of benevolent feedback of a very self-effacing and humble friend who's saying, look, I struggle with this too, but I really want to let you know, if you carry on working 17 hours a day without a break, it's going to be bad for you.
Yeah.
That kind of, it's just, again, I think that in the scriptural bits, it's like wounds of a friend are like kisses of gold or something like that.
Yeah.
It's a kind of saying like, there's something precious about the challenge that a friend brings that's very different to the weaponization of feedback.
And there's a famous Carl Rogers quote that you'll know, which is about, when the irony is that when you can accept yourself as you are, then you can change. There's that unconditional acceptance thing. But a bit that really fascinates me about it is that, especially in linked to feedback, when you're describing it in that way, is that is somebody giving you feedback to change for your benefit or for their benefit? Because if somebody's giving you some insight or sharing some reflections, or more likely telling you how something is impacting them for your benefit or for the benefit of your relationship, that is very different. And if they don't need you to change, then I think you're much freer to change. Like, what's the agenda?
Really helpful.
So that idea of weaponized feedback, what really worries me is how are they over attached to you needing to become a particular way for what agenda?
I think that's really great.
And how can we get to a space where I think that's actually more hopeful and trustful, that we're collaborating with something that's got a bigger purpose?
Yeah, I just want you to change for the sake of the world, like for your benefit, for your growth. I don't need you to change for me. I want to bless you and help you to do better.
Yeah.
Well, it's been really great just hearing a few of your insights, and there's so many more. We're going to enjoy partnership together on the Good Leader podcast, and you're actually going to be co-hosting this podcast with me. Just a few of your aspirations for the podcast. What are you hoping that people receive, from us together, from you personally? What's your dream for this?
That's such a great question, and I think, I know from the people that I work with, I know that leaders can be lonely, and that's a bad thing. And I'm really excited for an opportunity to meet with great people, because I think basically all people are great, really, and create a space, a non-judgmental, curious, interested space where people can share a little bit of their life and their learning, and that other people then can get access to that and feel equipped, inspired, encouraged in doing what they're doing where they are.
Amazing. Well, I'm so excited about bringing you on board and us partnering together on the Good Leader podcast, I think from our next episode onwards. So look forward to that. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Good Leader podcast. It's been a privilege to introduce my co-host, Will James, to you, and we look forward to sharing more insights with you in future episodes. Wherever you get your podcast, we pray that it will bless you and encourage you. We want to wish you a really great day. I'm Will Vanderhart.
And I'm Will James.
Goodbye until next time.